Hi, I'm Jennifer Wilcox. I'm the Director of Education at the National Cryptologic Museum at the National Security Agency. And today, we are talking about steganography, hidden in history. Steganography is the art of hiding a message to keep it away from prying eyes. It doesn't need to be encrypted. It doesn't need to be altered. It's just hiding it so others can't see it. And steganography is an ancient tool. It was used millennia ago, and the ancient Greek historian Herodotus told about ancient rulers who used methods to hide a message as it was being sent out. And one of those ancient rulers was one named Demaratus. And he learned that the Persians were going to be invading Sparta. So he needed to warn the Spartans. In order to do that, he used an ordinary wax writing tablet. He scraped off the wax, wrote the message on the wood behind it, and then reapplied the wax. And then as the courier was taking it to Sparta, if he got stopped, then the guards would look at that and it would just be a normal blank writing tablet, and they wouldn't think anything of it. When they got to Sparta, the Spartan leaders scraped off the wax, saw the message, and knew that the Persians were attacking. At that point, Leonidas gathered 300 of his best men and took them up to the mountain pass at Thermopylae, hoping to stop the Persians from coming through. Herodotus told about another very unique way of sending a message. Again, it involved avoiding the Persians. This time it was Hystasius, and he wanted to get the Persians out of the area that he was in, and he was asking his brother-in-law for assistance. Now, to send this secret message, he shaved the hair off of his favorite servant and then tattooed the message on his scalp, let the hair grow back, and then sent the servant on his way. When he got where he was going, the brother-in-law shaved his head and saw the message. Not the fastest way to send a message, but it is very well hidden. Now, invisible ink is another form of a steganographic method, and it dates back centuries. There's a 15th century Arabic book that hints that invisible ink would be a good way to hide a message. A 16th century scholar, Giovanni Battista Porta, has several recipes in his works describing different ways to make invisible ink. Matter of fact, one of those invisible ink methods was used by the British during the American Revolution. This is a message from the American Revolution. It's not British. This one is American. It was written by a spy for George Washington, who went by the codename Culper Jr. And the message that you can see in this dark black ink is the cover message. Okay? It simply says, the man who came to pick up supplies couldn't get them because the store was closed. We'll send them along later. And that way, if the courier were stopped and the British soldier read the message, it wouldn't be anything suspicious. The real message was written in invisible ink at the bottom in the blank part. And Culper Jr. wrote that the British were taking 8,000 troops out of New York City. That was their headquarters. And they were moving to Newport, Rhode Island, because they wanted to stop the French fleet from arriving in Newport and becoming entrenched. So Culper put that information in there in invisible ink. Now, the invisible ink was invented by Dr. James Jay, and it was a two-part method. One chemical was the ink, and another chemical was the reactivation agent. Now, it was typical for invisible inks of this time to be made visible simply by using heat. But George Washington didn't want anyone who might be suspicious that there was an invisible message here to just iron it and be able to see the information that was meant for him. So Dr. Jay's invisible ink did not reactivate with heat. You had to have this other chemical. So when George Washington got this message from Culper Jr., he painted over the blank part and the message was revealed. And at that point, he could act upon it. He really needed the French fleet to arrive. He also would very much like to capture New York City, take it back. But he didn't have enough men to stop the British. Okay? He couldn't attack New York City. He couldn't attack the British. But what he could do was march up and down the river on the other side of New York City and make it look like he was gathering his forces, preparing to attack the city now that they were down 8,000 troops. Well, the loyalists in the city sent word to the British general that Washington was gathering. So the British general brought his 8,000 troops back to New York City to stop Washington from an attack that Washington was never going to make. His real purpose was to stop the British from getting to Newport. And that allowed the French fleet to arrive in Newport and aid Washington throughout the rest of the war. This is another message from the American Revolution. This one is British. the British were actually quite adept at using steganographic methods. Now, again, the message here is nothing sinister. If you read it, it doesn't say anything that might hint at anything bad going on. It was a message from General Clinton to General Burgoyne. Now, Burgoyne had a plan. He wants to cut off New England from the southern colonies, and he wants to have this battle in Albany, and he expects General Clinton and General Howe to help him. General Howe had other ideas, and General Clinton is writing to Burgoyne, letting him know what's going on. But again, the message itself doesn't really say anything other than entire encouragement. It reads, "You will have heard, dear sir, I doubt not long before this can have reached you, that Sir William Howe is gone from hence. The rebels imagine that he is gone to the eastward. By this time, however, he has filled Chesapeake Bay with surprise and terror. Washington marched the greater part of the rebels to Philadelphia in order to oppose Sir William's army. I hear he is now returned upon finding none of our troops landed, but I am not sure of this. Great part of his troops are returned for certain. I am sure this counter-marching must be ruin to them. I am left to command here. Half my force may, I am sure, defend everything with much safety. I shall, therefore, send Sir William 4 or 5 battalions. I have too small a force to invade the New England provinces. They are too weak to make any effectual efforts against me, and you do not want any diversion in your favor. I can, therefore, very well spare him 1,500 men. I shall try something, certainly, toward the close of the year, not till then at any rate. It may be of use to inform you that report says all yields to you. I own to you that I think the business will quickly be over now. Sir William's move just at this time has been capital. Washington's has been the worst he could take in every respect. Sincerely give you much joy on your success, and am with great sincerity, your H.C." Okay? An encouraging message. That is not actually what the message says. The real message is hidden within, and it can be revealed through the use of a mask. When the mask is placed over the original letter, it says something entirely different. "Sir William Howe is gone to the Chesapeake Bay with the greatest part of the army. I hear he is landed, but am not certain. I am left here to command with too small a force to make any effectual diversion in your favor. I shall try something at any rate. It may be of use to you. I own to you, I think Sir William's move just at this time the worst he could take. Much joy on your success." So basically a completely different message that was being sent. Now, this is a great way to send a message because it has no revealing patterns that would hint at a secret message being inside. But it does require that both you and the recipient have that same matching mask. And they are really difficult to compose. You lay the mask down over your blank piece of paper, you write your real message in the open space, remove the mask, and now you have to fill in around what's already written. It not only has to physically fit the paper, but it also has to be able to be read and make sense. Okay, very difficult to compose. Something a little bit easier is just, again, hiding the message for transmission, like the Greeks and Romans had done. This is a message from General Howe to General Burgoyne. It's in English, nothing encrypted in it. You could read it if you got up close. But the way it was kept secret was that it was rolled up and hidden inside a quill feather pen. No one would be suspicious of anybody walking around with a pen. The recipient just has to know to pull the paper out and read it. Something a little more suspicious would be this silver ball. It's about the size of a bullet. In fact, it's sometimes referred to as the silver bullet. And it was intended to have small messages rolled up and hidden inside. And then the courier, if he's stopped or about to be captured, he can swallow the silver ball, and the message is going to be protected by the silver casing. And that's exactly what happened. General Henry Clinton is again sending a message to Burgoyne, and he's written it out and put it inside the silver ball. He gave it to one of his spies, a man named Daniel Taylor, and told him to take it to Burgoyne. Well, Taylor only gets about 30 miles outside of New York City when he gets stopped. He thinks he's being stopped by British soldiers, and he gets very irate that he's being impeded from his mission and tells them, "I am on a mission from General Clinton, and I demand that I be taken to General Clinton this minute." He was taken to General Clinton, American General George Clinton. The soldiers that stopped him were not British, they were in the Continental Army. Well, Taylor realizes right away that he is in the wrong camp. So he took the ball and he swallowed it like he's supposed to. But he was witnessed. And so George Clinton calls for a doctor who gives Taylor an emetic and makes him cough up the ball. Well, Taylor grabs the ball and he swallows it again. And they try to force him to take the medicine a second time, but he fought back and absolutely refused to drink it until General Clinton told him that if he did not take the medicine and cough up the ball, they would cut it out of him. So Taylor took the medicine, coughed up the ball. The Americans got the message. And Taylor, he was hanged for being a spy. Sadly, the message really wasn't worth all that important to the British or the Americans. It simply said, "Nous y voici." We are here. And nothing between us but American General Gates. I sincerely hope that this little success of ours may facilitate your operations. Hardly worth dying for. Now, moving up into the American Civil War, we have another spy ring that is using encryption and steganographic methods. This is Elizabeth Van Lew, and she is a resident of Richmond, Virginia, but she was educated in Philadelphia and had become an abolitionist. So when her father died, she freed all the enslaved people that her father had kept and asked some of them to come back and be part of her spy network. One of them was Mary Richards Bowser, and Elizabeth sent Mary north to get some schooling, and then Mary came back and joined her spy ring. Legend has it that she was employed by the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, in his household. So she could go around the house. Maybe she overheard conversations between Davis and his leaders and his commanders. Maybe she read things that were left out on the table. Okay? But she gathered information and she reported it back to Elizabeth. Elizabeth was getting information from other sources as well, which she would then encrypt. And then she would hide the messages for transmission. She would hide them in hollowed out heels of her agent's shoes or inside hollow vegetables that she would put into a basket, and one of her agents as a servant would be taking it across the river to Union General Sharp. Nobody's going to stop a servant from carrying a basket of vegetables. Every morning, General Sharp got information directly from President Jefferson Davis's household. He said that some of the best information that he got came from Elizabeth Van Lew, and Elizabeth said some of her best information came from Mary Bowser. Now, in the 20th century, we have Sir Robert Baden-Powell. He is probably best known as the founder of Boy Scouting, but at the turn of the century, he was an intelligence officer for the British Army. In his 1915 book, My Adventures as a Spy, he wrote about ways to surreptitiously gather information and some clever ways to hide that information. In a chapter that he entitled The Value of Being Stupid, he wrote, "The exceedingly stupid Englishmen who wandered about foreign countries, sketching cathedrals, catching butterflies, or fishing trout, were merely laughed at as harmless lunatics." Okay? These artists, bird watchers, fishermen, they weren't. They were actually intelligence officers. And they would be gathering information about enemy fortifications and defenses, which they would then hide as pictures of, in this case, the fortress is designed as a cathedral stained glass window. The fortress shape defined the shape of the window, and then the armaments and the defenses, their positions and their size, would be indicated by some of the decoration within the window. But they could also be disguised as maybe the pattern of a butterfly wing or the veins in the leaf. So lots of different ways to hide a secret message. In the United States, we have William and Elizabeth Friedman. They're basically considered to be the godparents of American cryptology. They spent their entire professional career in the cryptologic field. And they're famous for having turned what had been a mystical talent for breaking cryptograms into the mathematical field that it is today. But they also had fun, not only with cryptology, but with steganography. This is a holiday greeting card that they sent out in 1928. Now, the mixed up bunches of letters over there, that's the hidden message. It's effectively a transposition cipher. In order to see it, you have to have a grille, much like that British mask. And the holes line up over specific letters so that you can read it top to bottom, left to right. So it says, for Christmas greetings in 28. And then you turn it, and you get the next set that brings up the letters, brings you word of Christmas cheer. You turn it to the third side and the fourth side. So you get a nice little holiday message from the Friedmans in a clever way. Okay? Now, again, like the British mask, this is rather difficult to actually create. Each of those holes has to be in a location so that when you turn it, it doesn't land on a space that had a previous hole. So you can have all the different spaces have their own individual letters. It's not as easy as you'd think, but a lot of fun. Now, a contemporary of the Friedmans was Herbert Yardley, and he had been a code clerk in World War I. During the interwar period, he was actually the chief of the first peacetime cryptologic service in the United States. But then in 1930, they shut that service down, and Yardley, he needs money. So he wrote a book called The American Black Chamber, detailing everything he and his team had done breaking other countries' diplomatic codes. So he was never hired again by the US government. So he needs to find another way to make some income. He has several different jobs, but one of them that he comes up with is selling invisible ink. He had two kinds. One was intended for children, and it was a secret recipe that he had of his own. And like Dr. James J., it was a two-part code, or two-part system. He had one chemical concoction for the invisible ink and a different one as the reactivation agent. And he didn't let anyone know what this recipe was. He made it himself, bottled it himself. His employees, all they did was put labels on them, package them for shipping. The other invisible ink that he created was intended for direct mail marketing. And advertisers would print out their message in this invisible ink and ship it out to everyone. And they would then have to submerge it in water to make the invisible ink reappear. If the paper dried out, the message disappeared again. But get it wet again, and it'll reappear again. So kind of a clever gimmick to get people to read what you're advertising. In the 1940s, World War II, the Cold War, microdots became an efficient way to send communication. Microdots are tiny, tiny photographs of pages, documents, schematics, things like that. It was first used in 1870 in Paris, but it wasn't until the mid-20th century that it really became exploited. In 1940, a double agent told the FBI that the German agents were using microdots. It took another year before the FBI was able to actually find a microdot on an envelope sent by the Germans. They later found tiny strips of film that were underneath postage stamps. Now, microdots are taken, their pictures are taken with a special camera, and then they print out negatives that are only thumbnail size. That is then backlit, and a reversing microscope is pointed down at it, and another picture is taken, which reduces the image down to 5/100ths of an inch. And then these would be affixed to a letter or an envelope. It could be the period at the end of a sentence or the dot over an I in standard typetext. Okay? The receiver just needs a microscope so that they can make it large enough to be able to be read. When we get into the 21st century, we're finally into the digital age. Okay? In 2010, the FBI arrested 10 Russian agents. They were under deep cover in the United States, posing as American citizens. If they were your neighbors, you never would have suspected. Flawless American English, married, had kids, went to soccer games, the whole thing. But their real purpose was to gather information and cozy up with people who had access to classified information. Now, they got communications from the Russian Federation through normal communication methods, fast radio bursts, or they would transfer documents in the brush encounters where they literally passed off the briefcase or the backpack as they crossed paths. Okay? But they also used steganography. And that is how they would receive some of their instructions from the Russian Federation, over internet web pages. Okay? These are hidden in the pixels. This is one of the pages that they were told to go to. And they had a 27-character password and a Russian steganographic program that would reveal the hidden message hidden within the pixels of an open, public image on the internet that anybody else would look at and say, oh, look at those pretty flowers. But they had the ability to bring out the hidden message hidden within. So steganography, again, is years of millennia of being able to hide secret messages. How you do that is just changes according to the technology that comes along. And really, how and where to hide a message is only limited by the user's imagination.